When we imagine a Civil War battle in our heads, the image is heavily tainted by media such as Gettysburg and Gods and Generals, along with pervasive myths about the Civil War that have persisted after hundreds of years. These images show a glorious and chivalric scene, long lines of men trading volleys in open fields, while men fall by the score standing perfectly upright, men shunning ducking and diving as an act of cowardice. These false perceptions seep their way into reenacting as well, which furthermore perpetuates these myths into the hearts and minds of the public. The reality of Civil War combat cannot be farther from these myths. I am not saying that there were not combat scenarios where men would be perfectly upright and calm. These attributes would be seen in battles taking place at further distances and with less casualties. But the truth about to be made evident is that lines would be broken up. Men would be surging and firing as they went on during an advance. Men would be flinching at the balls and shells whistling overhead and skipping on the ground towards their feet. Organizations of men would take advantage of the cover the landscape provides. Men would be kneeling and laying down in some cases. And the organizations that survived the chaos of Civil War combat would be loading and firing as fast as they could, regardless of volleys. This video will present numerous primary accounts from various battles across all theaters of the war that make the above attributes of a battle evident. The following excerpts are probably some of the most insightful accounts we can get of Civil War combat, coming from a veteran of the Army Northern Virginia. The upcoming excerpts are by the famed Barry Benson of the 1st South Carolina Infantry and later Dunlop Sharpshooter Battalion. Although many, including myself, question some of the more colorful stories of escape and sharpshooting, there is no denying that Benson had been in the thick of it. These accounts are Benson describing what a battle was like from his experience. He is not drawing a picture of any specific battle, just the attributes of the majority he had seen while in the 1st South Carolina Infantry. Benson starts by describing how a battle starts. A battle is entered to, mostly, in as good order and with as close drill front as the nature of the ground will permit. But at the first pop, pop of the rifles, there comes a sudden loosening of the ranks, a freeing of selves from the impediment of contact, and every man goes to fighting on his own hook, firing as and when he likes, and reloading as fast as he fires. Benson continues. He takes shelter wherever he can find it, so he does not get too far away from his company, and his officers will call his attention to this should he move too far. He may stand up, he may kneel down, he may lie down. It is all right, though. Mostly the men keep standing, except when silent under fire, then they lie down. Benson gives us a very detailed picture of how men acted under fire in his observation. The men go into the fight in good order, but when they really get into it, order starts to break down. Terrain breaks up regimental formations, and men fire as fast as they can and duck and dive. One of the more interesting themes Benson presents is a lying down when under fire, but not returning the fire. In simpler terms, if a regiment was waiting in reserve and were under artillery fire, they would lie down. Benson then continues by describing how confusion starts. And it is not the officers alone who give the orders. The commanded charge may come from a private in the line whose quick eye sees the opportunity, and whose orders brooks the no delay. Springing forward, he shouts, "Charge, boys, charge!" The line catches his enthusiasm, answers with yells, and follows him in the charge. Generally, it is a wild and spontaneous cry from many throats along the line, readily invoked by the least sign of wavering in the enemy. Benson then gives us a detailed look at how men talk in the ranks during a fight. A battle is too busy a time and too absorbing to admit of a great deal of talk. Still, you will hear such remarks and questions as, "How many cartridges you got? My gun's getting mighty dirty. What's become of Jones? Looky here, Butler. Mind how you shoot. That ball didn't miss my head 2 inches. Just keep cool, will you? I've got better sense than to shoot anybody. Well, I don't like you standing so close behind me, nohow. I say, look at Lieutenant Dyson behind that tree. Pretty rough fight, ain't it, Captain? Captain, don't you think we better move up a little just along that knoll?" All this mixed and mingled with fearful yells, and maybe curses too at the enemy. The important part is towards the end of the above excerpt where Benson describes the organizations of men in a fight will take advantage of the terrain for cover. Benson continues by describing how an advance would look like. And a charge looks just as disorderly. With the bursts of yells, a long, wavering, loose-jointed line sweeps rapidly forward, only now and then one or two stopping to fire, while here and there drop the killed and the slightly wounded, some of them, giving no heed but rushing on, while others run hurriedly half-bent to the rear. The colors drop, are seized again drop, and are again lifted, no men in the reach of them, daring to pass them by on the ground. This has to be one of the most detailed descriptions of a Civil War charge to exist. This account will be supported later in the video by other accounts. Perhaps the most important account that Benson gives is the one describing the cohesion in these units. For the battlefield is not a drill room, nor is the battle an occasion for drill, and there is the merest semblance of order maintained. I say semblance of order, for there is an undercurrent of order in tried troops that surpasses that of the drill room. It is that order that springs from the confidence comrades have in each other, from the knowledge that these messmates of yours, whether they stand or lie upon the ground, close together or scattered apart, in front of you 3 paces or in your rear 6 paces, in the open or behind a tree or rock, that these, though they do not touch elbows to the right, are nevertheless keeping dressed upon the colors in some rough fashion, and that the line will not move forward and leave them there, nor will they move back and leave the line. There is the cherry on top. Although Benson says that the battlefield is not a drill room, the cohesion that he describes comes from the endless hours of drill and positive leadership. This cohesion appears on the field as a regiment deploying from column of companies to line of battle faster than the colonel could get the command out, simply because these men know what to do and how to act as one unit. The following account comes from Alan C. Redwood of the 55th Virginia Infantry. This account describes a charge made by Field's Virginia Brigade during the Battle of Glendale or Frazier's Farm. Redwood first starts out by describing how a charge looks like from his observation. The line soon loses all semblance of regular formation. The companies have become merely groups of men, loading and firing and taking advantage of any accident of ground, natural depression, tree, rock, even a pile of fence rails that will give protection. But if the soldier is about where he belongs, to the right or left of the regimental colors, according to the normal place of his company in line, he feels reasonably sure of resuming formation whenever the command may come to cease firing and to dress on the colors, preparatory to an advance or charge. If the latter, though they move, may begin in perfect order, it is almost immediately lost. Redwood gives us a very interesting detail, that detail being that men will take advantage of the terrain when in a regular firefight, but will reform their ranks in close order before an advance. But this close order will be lost as soon as the advance begins. Redwood then describes the charge at Frazier's Farm. The charge delivered by our brigade at Frazier's Farm was, as seen by the Federal general who was captured there, in V-shape, without order and in perfect recklessness. This formation was in no wise intentional, the apex of the V in question being simply the brigade commander, General Field, who personally conducted the attack upon the battery and the slope of the sides, and as the individual prowess of his followers might determine. Even more characteristic of a Confederate infantry onset was a description of an officer of high rank on that side, a tumultuous rush of men each aligning on himself and yelling like a demon on his own hook. This account certainly supports what Benson wrote in his memoirs, a scene of boiling chaos with very little order. The following account comes from Captain John Reed of the 8th Georgia at the Second Battle of Deep Bottom during the Siege of Petersburg. There are swaying movements in our line, something like the waves that run along a rope swung loosely between 2 points when it is shaken at an end. Everybody seemed to be tempted forward. Somebody, I believe it was just a private, said in that tone which is always heard by the brave in battle, "Over the fence and charge." Reed continues, "There was no lead to command except the experience of the field and line officers and the combative, but prudent advancing of Southern volunteers. It is a study for the military critic. Our line looked far more broken and dressed in the militia drill than the Georgia scenes, but that line, so far as I can judge, was exactly as it ought to have been. It was a combination of Indian weariness and English stubbornness. It had antennae throughout, to tell by delicate contact when to recoil and when to move forward." This account supports Benson's claim of sometimes the order to charge coming from a private, and that charges like this would be the merest semblance of order. This next account comes from William Thompson Lusk of the 79th New York. 3 days after the Battle of Fredericksburg, he will write to his mother describing the disastrous charge made by his brigade. "Stragglers run rapidly to the rear, then whole regiments fall back with torn colors and broken ranks. It is of no use. That terrible stone wall is alive with death. Many regiments try to reach it. Their efforts avail to nothing, though. Nearly in the center of the hill, west, there stands a fine old Virginia mansion of red brick with stately colonnade running along its front. This point was often attacked by our troops, but the house was like a hornet's nest. The enemy was strongly posted about it, and its alcoves, outbuildings, and windows. There was death only for those who tried to reach it. Our troops found some partial cover at a point below the house, at the foot of the hill, where a small white house stood. Lusk gives us a detailed description of how men, if cover was offered by the terrain, would take it. The following accounts come from different soldiers and describe the intense fighting at the Battle of Prairie Grove in December of 1862. Columbus H. Gray of Pleasant's Arkansas Regiment describes the moment they ambushed the 19th Iowa in the Borden apple orchard. We were all laying down, and the Federals came up within 50 steps of us when our colonel ordered us to rise and fire. Although it is a short account, Gray tells us that the men were laying down. This indicates that granular tactics, such as ordering men to kneel or lay down, were used for concealment. This is a common theme in other battles as well. Colonel Pleasance, seeing the 19th Iowa melt before his eyes, orders his men to hop the low fence and charge into the apple orchard. Gray vividly remembers this moment. When we was ordered to charge, we all broke ranks and got ahead. As the Federals fell back in great disorder down the steep hill in front of the Borden house, some Arkansas regiments of Fagan's brigade are going to pursue after them. An unnamed Federal officer is going to vividly describe the scene. Immense hordes came out of the woods on our left and spread upon the field, looking from a distance like a nest of ants. After the desperate fighting at the Borden house, Blunt's Federal Division is going to appear on the field on the Confederate left flank. Parsons' Rebel Missouri Brigade is going to make a counterattack through the thick underbrush and down the steep ridge. Vincent Osborne of the 2nd Kansas Cavalry recalls the desperate scene. We did not fire by volleys, but each man fired when he saw some enemy to shoot at, and the enemy fired in the same manner. The scene on the Confederate side was no different at all. A soldier in Caldwell's Rebel Missouri Regiment recalls, "We lay down upon our knees to avoid the showers of balls that came flying in death-like fury through the trees." Spencer Mitchell, Mitchell's Missouri Regiment, similarly recalls, "A lay down behind a bush about the size of my arm." Arenas Myers of the 11th Kansas Infantry wrote, "All that saved us was laying flat on the ground, and they shot over us." These explicit accounts gives us a very detailed picture of how soldiers acted in this type of combat. The picture is certainly not like how it is portrayed in Gods and Generals or Gettysburg. This next account is written by John M. Barry of the 8th Arkansas Infantry at the Battle of Stones River in 1862. Liddell's Arkansas Brigade will make an assault across open ground at this battle. Barry recalls, "On we went, and in an open field we found ourselves face to face with the Federal force stationed behind a rail fence. I thought they would kill us all. We laid down upon our breasts and firing as best as we could, we would roll over on our backs and load, then turn back and fire. I remember shooting right over Dick Jones's head. He looked back at me and said, 'John, you'll shoot me.' I said, 'No, I'll not. You keep your head down.' I loaded and banged with my gun again right at his ear. It so deafened and alarmed him that he turned again, used some very rough words, and declared that I would kill him yet." Barry gives us great details of how his regiment acted while pinned in an open field, and how men would talk in the ranks to each other. The final account in this video comes from J.P. Cook of the 1st Texas Infantry at the Battle of Antietam. The 1st Texas famously advanced under confusion to Miller's cornfield. What happened next was vividly described by Cook. "We began firing at the men around the battery, and after we had just given them a couple of rounds, they abandoned their guns and took flight. Just as they did, so a body of Federals who lay behind a rock fence 50 yards away and partly hidden from our view by the standing corn poured a volley into us. Turning our eyes in this direction, we began firing at them, taking the precaution, however, to lie down and do our shooting. You can imagine how brisk the firing was from both sides when I tell you that within 5 minutes not a stalk of corn was left standing between us and the rock fence." There are dozens of other accounts from various units and battles of the war that describe how Civil War combat really was and were not included in this video. I hope the accounts presented in this video change your perspective on Civil War combat as it did mine. Civil War combat was not an organized picture like you see in most reenactments. It was a scene that can only be described by one word: chaos. This is not an end-all be-all study on Civil War combat, but I encourage you to research the scenarios you are trying to portray or learn about. But keep these accounts in mind. Comparing these accounts to most reenactments I've been in, they need some serious reconsideration. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Thanks.